In this video, we're going to discuss some disadvantages of using variable costing. So one of the issues is that variable costing is not consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. So if you're a manufacturer and you go to put out some financial statements for your investors and creditors, you have to use absorption costing to calculate cost of goods sold and so forth. You cannot say, well, I'm going to switch from absorption costing to variable costing and I'm going to put out my financial statements that way. It doesn't work like that. For external purposes, you have to use absorption costing. Thus, if you do decide to implement variable costing, it will be in addition to doing absorption costing financial statements. So you're basically going to present two sets of financial statements. One is going to be for external, the investors, the creditors, here you go, it's based on absorption costing. But then for internal purposes, you would create a second set of financial statements according to variable costing. So basically, that is asking a company, if they were going to switch to variable costing, to do something extra. It's going to take more time. It's going to take more money to maintain two sets of financial statements. And so some companies just say, hey, look, we're already forced to do absorption costing, so we're just going to stick with that. Another issue is if a company uses just-in-time inventory system, it might not be that sensible for them to say we want to do variable costing, because the whole idea behind just-in-time inventory is that a company would have maintained very low levels of inventory, close to zero if at all possible. And what variable costing is trying to solve is it's trying to solve issues related to the change in the inventory balance. Okay, remember, with changes in inventory can lead to fluctuations in operating profit when a company is using absorption costing. Because if the company produces more units than it sells, it's going to defer some of the fixed manufacturing overhead to future periods, and that's going to make the company look more profitable in the current period than it is, and so forth. We've talked about that in prior videos, so I don't want to get too into it. But if the company has zero inventory and is maintaining close to or basically no inventory, then there's not going to be this issue. We're not going to have any issues with fluctuations in the operating profit because the company is trying deliberately as part of its strategy to have zero inventory. So changes in inventory balance aren't going to affect the operating profit because the company doesn't have any inventory. So if you use just in time, might not be that great an idea to say, let's try and implement variable costing system. Now, another issue with variable costing is that it is assuming, so when we take like direct labor and we say $6 per unit, we're assuming that this is going to be constant. But here's the thing. What if your company, let's say it's $6 per unit as a direct labor, but you are deciding whether to accept a special order from a customer, and if you do accept that, your employees are going to have to work overtime. Maybe they're already working a full-time as it is, and so they'd have to work overtime to accept this job. And if they were to work overtime, you're going to have to pay them more per hour. You might have to pay them time and a half or double time or something like that. And so then in that scenario, the direct labor is not going to be $6 per hour. It might be 8 or 10 or 12 or so forth, or per unit, excuse me. So if you basically want to bear in mind that even though we have these variable costs on a per unit basis, that they might not be constant throughout. It's constant, but only within the relevant range. Okay? But maybe the biggest issue, the most significant issue with variable costing is the need to educate the employees so that they understand that when you implement variable costing, basically the product cost per unit is going to go down. So the product cost per unit is going to go down. And the reason is that this fixed manufacturing overhead is going to be treated as a period cost, and it's going to be expensed immediately. So it's no longer going to be treated as a product cost. So if we were to think of the product cost per unit with absorption costing, so basically I've got for the 3 periods that I had from the data above, we have $50 a unit, $45 a unit, $65. It changes each period based on, again, the changes in the inventory. But the main idea is that the fixed manufacturing overhead per unit is included in the product cost. But when you do variable costing, you are treating the fixed manufacturing overhead, you're treating that as a period cost. It's being expensed, so it does not appear here. It does not appear here. It's not that it's not expensed. It is expensed. Right here's our variable costing income statement. It's expensed, but it's not treated as a part of the product cost. Okay, so now you have taken this out. Now look at the product cost per unit. Let's just look at 2019. 2019 under variable costing, $35 a unit product cost, $50 a unit for absorption costing. So one of your sales staff might think, hey, we switched to, or now that you switch to a new system, they say, hey, look, it's actually become cheaper. It's become cheaper for us to produce this product. And so what they then might say is, well, hey, now we can sell it for less. We can reduce the price and still make money because actually it became cheaper for our company to produce this. But in fact, nothing of your cost structure, your cost did not change. The cost did not change. What changes that you're using a new system that just doesn't include the fixed manufacturing overhead as part of the product cost. So it's deceptive to like some member of the sales staff. They're thinking, oh, we just got more efficient at producing this, and so I can reduce the price and we can still make money. But you need to educate the employees and say, listen, the product cost per unit went down, but it's only because of the new system. And it's because we're not including the fixed manufacturing overhead as part of the product cost. We're treating it like the fixed SG&A or something else, where we're basically like some marketing expense, where we're basically just treating it as a period cost where it's expensed immediately. So you need the employees to understand that the product cost per unit, it didn't become, your company didn't suddenly become more efficient at producing this, and therefore they can't just turn around and decrease the price. That would cost your company money.